Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another instalment of Revisiting, where I look back on one album that seems to hold some significance for me in some way. This is one I was going to feature a while ago, and it was on the list, but with the passing of Tina Turner I thought I would finally feature it. This is Icon Tina Turner, River Deep and Mountain High. So obviously Tina Turner, one of the great female Goliaths of American soul music and rock and roll music, really, to be honest, has passed away. She will be much missed. Gotta be honest, I was never a big fan of the 80s incarnation of Tina. The big booming MTV era never really did much for me, but I'm a big fan of the 60s and 70s incarnations of Tina, and this record is very significant for me in that it's the first soul record I ever bought. The price sticker is on there still, £2.50. I bought this from Leeds Market in 1992. The reason I bought it, really, it was a Beatles connection, as is often the way with me. I've been reading some interviews with George Harrison, and he'd mentioned the song River Deep Mountain High in reference to Phil Spector. In the interview he was being asked about the All Things Must Pass sessions, and he was talking about what a great producer Phil Spector was, and he mentioned this record River Deep Mountain High, which I'd never heard before at this stage, and he described it as one of the great all-time cinematic rock records, and I thought, right, I need to hear that. So first chance I got, I toddled off and found this record. And like I said, it's not the kind of thing I would have picked up back in those days. I wasn't a soul fan at all. My musical taste at that point were pretty much confined to the stuff that I'd grown up with, really. A lot of British rock, and this was even before I discovered blues music or anything. I was maybe about 2 years away from discovering the blues, maybe a year actually, and probably at least 3 or 4 years away from properly getting into soul music. So I do remember when I bought this record, I brought it home and I listened to the track River Deep Mountain High, which is the first song on side one, and I probably just filed it away after that. I didn't particularly take much interest in the other tracks, and I could hear what was special about that song. It was clearly a huge watermark, really, in studio production. Just kind of Wagner mixed with 60s pop music. Just great crashing drums and amazing swelling banks of orchestration, and harmony vocals. And but then of course you've got Tina's vocal, which is really holds its own actually in the face of all this let's face it, overproduction on the part of Phil Spector. Tina knew how to dominate a record even with all that going on around her, all that crashing and banging. So I could definitely hear that it was an incredible piece of work, but like I said, the music on the rest of the record didn't mean much to me at the time. It wasn't really my kind of thing, so the record lived on my shelf for many years, or a few years anyway, and then I started to get it out again a little bit later on when I started to clue into soul music, which was probably about 96, 97, something like that. So I dug it out again and gave it a spin, and got quite into it. But I always assumed that this record was a compilation. So for a start, it's on the Music for Pleasure label, which was a budget label here in the UK, and I grew up with MFP records in my childhood. Some of the Beatles records that I had when I was a kid were on this label, so it was a label that was well known to me, and they were known as being a budget label, and there was something about this package which made me assume that it was a compilation album. And it was John Bellamy here on the Vinyl Community a few years ago who put me straight on this and told me, because I think I'd shown it in a video for some reason, and John just said to me, no, that's not a compilation album, that is an original studio album, but it's been repackaged. So I thought that was quite interesting. So delving into the history of this record, it's a pretty convoluted story. I mean, I'm just going to give you the absolute basic fact about it. One thing I love about MFP records is you get some history on the back. So in terms of making videos, it makes things very, very straightforward. So it's great. It gives you some background here. Ike Turner, who does not have a great reputation, it must be said, and with Tina's passing, I'm not here to defend Ike Turner or any of his behaviour, really. Born in Clarksdale, in the blues-rich Mississippi Delta country on November the 5th, 1931. He was a radio DJ and a talent scout, and he had this band, the Kings of Rhythm, which Tina Turner eventually joined. Tina was born Anna Marie Tina Braddock in Brownsville, Tennessee in 1938, and it was Tina's sister who introduced her to Ike, and then they got signed to, I think it was it Sue Records, and they started having all these soul hits. And of course they sort of hooked up with the British rock scene, really, courtesy of supporting the Rolling Stones on tour, and they always sort of crossed over into that rock field, really. I mean, their big hit Nutbush City Limit famously is the song that Brian Johnson sang when he came to audition to be in AC/DC, so she was definitely, or they were definitely, seen as being a bit of a rock soul crossover. And then of course she was in Tommy by the Who as the Acid Queen, wasn't she? So what an extraordinary career. What happened was Phil Spector saw Ike and Tina playing in a club, and he invited them to do some recording with him. He wanted to sign them to his record label in 1966. There was a bit of skullduggery going on with the label that Ike and Tina were signed to already, which was Loma Warner's, but then Phil managed to get them onto the label and they recorded this album. So this is where it gets kind of complicated. For some reason, Phil only produced half the record. So Phil Spector produces half the tracks using his patented wall of sound, and then the remainder of the tracks are produced by Ike Turner, and quite a few of them are re-recordings of old hits from Tina and Ike's pre-Phil Spector days. There was one of their big hit singles, I think it was A Fool in Love, which had been one of their earliest hits, that gets re-recorded on here, produced by Ike Turner. So the record has a very strange, it's kind of split down the middle between the Phil Spector tracks, which obviously have that sound, that great huge booming orchestral sound, interspersed with these totally different Ike Turner produced tracks, which are very, very gutbucket, very funky, fantastic to listen to. I mean, I've got to say, you know, if I had to choose either the Ike Turner songs on this record or the Phil Spector ones, I would choose the Ike Turner ones every time, because they're so much funkier, so much dirtier, and the playing on them sounds so much crisper. Obviously with the Phil Spector sound, everything gets a bit lost in that huge booming ambience. So on side one you've got River Deep, which is the Spector one, and then it goes to I Idolize You, which is one of the Ike Turner produced tracks. A Love Like Yours Don't Come Knocking Every Day, the old Dozier Holland song, that is Phil Spector again, and that is absolutely immense. Huge ambience in that. A Fool in Love and Make 'Em Wait, both produced by Ike Turner again. Make 'Em Wait, so good, so fantastically funky and crunchy. And then Hold On Baby at the end of side one is a Spector one. Every Day I Have to Cry is certainly a Phil Spector production, and that one works really well actually. And then it finishes with a couple of Ike Turner tracks. Such a Fool for You, which I think is one of the real belters on this record, really very powerful. So as a product, as a finished record, it is a bit of a kind of strange, bumpy journey really. It's not maybe the smoothest of rides you could ask for. It's quite an interesting combination of two different styles and two very different production outlooks, I suppose, and really a totally different background. You know, Phil Spector, the great symphonic pop producer, and Ike Turner. You know, some people say that he invented rock and roll. Really, you know, he did a very early rock and roll record back in the 50s. So the convoluted history with this record is pretty complicated. So it originally came out on Phil's record label, but it sort of didn't come out really, because the single, I think River Deep Mountain High, was released as a single and completely flopped unexpectedly. So the record was pulled. A few copies were put on sale, but they were withdrawn quite quickly. But the single was very successful in the UK. And that resulted in the album being re-released by London Records in 1966, and it got to number 27 in the charts in the UK. And then in '69 it was re-released again in the US on A&M, but it had a slightly different track list. There was one song substitution. You're So Fine was substituted with I'll Never Need You More Than This. Not sure what the chart placing was at that point, but certainly it did have a sort of a checkered career really. And then this version, this MFP version, came out in 1979, and I think it was the rejigged track list. There was only one track that was different between the two original releases, but anyway, the FMP came out in '79, and I bought my copy in 1992. So there you go. There's the history of that. So This has always held pride of place in my collection. Very, very pleased to have it still after all these years. I lost loads of records back from those, back in those student or post-student days. Really, I had quite a few records go missing, but this one has managed to survive, and it's still in really nice condition. And it's one that I still play quite a lot. Actually, played it yesterday before making the video. It still sounds great, albeit with that caveat that there's a slightly strange discrepancy between the two production styles. Anyway, thought that would be a nice video to do given Tina's passing, so rest in peace Tina Turner, and thanks everybody for watching. Please leave some comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.